G7 leaders set to meet virtually later today to try to forge a common approach to the new government in Syria. Transition leaders have pledged to protect the rule of law after years of abuse under ousted President Bashar al-Assad. In a statement released yesterday, the G7 reaffirmed their commitment to the Syrian people and gave their reassurance of support in the transition to an, quote, inclusive and non-sectarian government. They also call for the protection of human rights, particularly for minorities, while emphasizing the importance of holding the Assad regime accountable for its crimes. The group says it will work with and fully support any government that respects those basic principles. A U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, also discussing Syria with his Turkish counterpart in Ankara, where there was broad agreement on their vision for the country's future and how they can support that vision. Both sides also stressing the importance of countering any resurgence of the Islamic State group. Syria's new leadership says it's willing to cooperate with Washington to search for Americans who disappeared under Assad's rule, including U.S. journalist Austin Tice, who was abducted in 2012. Another American, that's Travis Timmerman, has been located. Washington is working to bring him home. Elsewhere in Syria, Israel's defense minister has ordered the military to prepare to stay in the buffer zone throughout winter. The UN-patrolled buffer zone is supposed to separate Israeli and Syrian forces in the Golan Heights. It was seized by the Israeli army on Sunday, just hours after Syrian rebels ousted the president. And more, we're joined by Philip Crowther, who joins us live in the Syrian capital of Damascus. Philip, it's the first Friday since the ouster of Assad, and the rebel leader has attended Friday prayers at Damascus's landmark Umayyad Mosque. Now, where you are, you can overlook this mosque. What's the mood like where you are?
These are extraordinary scenes in the Syrian capital, Damascus, and these are scenes that are being repeated right now throughout Syria, where there currently is rebel rule, and those are large parts of the country. You can make out behind me the new colors of this new Syria, the red, white and black bars of the new flag with those 3 red stars in the middle. That is the opposition flag. Those are the opposition colors now in power here in Syria. Those colors, you could not have been seen alive with them here just a week ago. Now, we are already seeing thousands of people descending on Umayyad Square right behind me, and we expect there to be many, many more as the day progresses. There had been that call from the rebel leader al-Jilani, who now goes by the name of Ahmed Sharaa. He had called on Syrians to come out and celebrate in the streets after Friday prayers. And that's precisely what they're doing here in Damascus. Friday prayers being held at the city's landmark mosque in the old part of town, and people now descending on the central square that you can see here. Now, just to give you an idea of how extraordinary this moment is in Syria's history, the colors you see here, you could not have shown those just a few days ago. And this is the same place, the same square you see behind me, where there were huge pro-Assad demonstrations in the year 2011. That is when the rebellion against him first began in many cities here in Syria. I think it's fair to say that the pictures that you'll see coming out of Damascus and other cities here in Syria will be historic today.
All right. However, what lies ahead for Syria will depend on what happens outside its borders, given the many external forces who have vested interest in different parties gaining power within Syria. Reports of Israeli strikes, hundreds of strikes that have been stepped up since the weekend, with at least 70 to 80% of strategic military assets of Syria now destroyed by Israeli strikes.
Yeah, and we actually heard a few airstrikes during the night here in Damascus. They were loud enough to make the windows rattle. And we also, yesterday in the daylight, heard at least one jet overhead. And the only planes that have been in Syrian airspace since the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad have been Israeli fighter jets. There have been hundreds of airstrikes on military targets in Syria since Bashar al-Assad was overthrown in those last 6 days in the history of this free Syria. Israel says that it wants to make sure that weapons don't fall into extremist hands. We haven't heard yet from this new rebel leadership here in Syria what their policy, what their stance is toward Israel. But of course there are many who have a view as to what this new Syria should look like. US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken says he wants to see a Syria that does not pose a threat to any of Syria's neighbors. That is the point of view of the United States. In the meantime, Israel is present in the air over Syria, but also on the ground. Israeli troops having entered at the start of this new Syria into the Golan Heights, but also further into Syrian territory where they are right now. No advances of Israeli troops to report, but also no reports or evidence of those troops moving back toward Israeli territory.
Well, thanks for that. Philip Crowther reporting live there from Damascus.